Good evening, folks. Good evening. We're about to get started in just a second here. Thank you for tuning in. We have a video here that we want to start you out with, and then we'll be back in a moment with our conversation. And we have an amazing person with us tonight, and I know you're going to thoroughly enjoy him. So we'll be back with you in just a second.
Hey, there's gotta be more to this life, man. Just waking up, existing, this ain't cool at all. I gotta take a chance. This can't be it.
Gotta live these dreams before I'm dead, yeah. Did you hear what I said? Get my vision clear and I pledge. Gotta live these dreams before I'm dead, yeah. Did you hear what I said? Get my vision clear and I pledge to never live my life on the edge. Yeah, I think I'm about to jump. Yeah, I think I'm about to jump. Cause I finally realized why I'm here. Yeah, I think I'm about to jump. Yeah, I think I'm about to jump.
Good evening, folks. It's Pastor Robert Johnson back with you for another broadcast of Ignite, our weekly faith-based conversation for cultivating human potential and exploring faith possibilities. We're so thankful that you watch every week. We're grateful that you spread the word, that you tag folks. Do that again tonight. Enjoy tonight's guest, and please get ready as we end this year with some amazing guests and prepare for 2022, where we have even more amazing human beings coming before you that we want you to be, by whom we want you to be inspired and encouraged. Thank you again for watching tonight's broadcast.
Yeah, I think I'm about to jump. Yeah, I think I'm about to jump. Cause I finally realized why I'm here. Yeah, I think I'm about to jump. Yeah, I think I'm about to jump.
It's about that time, dog.
I ain't trying to live my life on the edge. Yeah, I think I'm about to.
I just want the best, I can't stop this feeling. Snap over everything, my only option, really. Since Wu-Tang Clan wasn't nothing to mess with. I had bars and the beats and the hooks with the message. Mine's off the pine, on my P's and Q's. CH got the juice, it's my time to shine. Haters like, oh, you follow Sean Carter's blueprint? Wrong hope, homie, this is God-honored movements. Why do I keep second guessing though? Like I don't know where my blessings flow from, and how far would this endeavor go? But if I never take a leap, then I'll never know. Looking over the cliff, frozen and stiff, even though I'm bestowed with the gift to uplift. But the mind keeps racing, prone to what if, scared I won't reach my peak, blowing the drift.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, folks. Welcome to this December 1st broadcast of Ignite, our weekly faith-based conversation for cultivating human potential and faith possibilities. And we're so excited to be back with you on behalf of St. Mark United Methodist Church in Wichita, Kansas, the place, the community of possibilities and transformation, a church at the heart of the city with the city at heart. And I am delighted to be back with you. I hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving break. We took a break also, but I hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving break. I got to say that I thoroughly enjoyed traveling to my home state of Mississippi to visit my siblings and to visit my mom and my dad, to get a chance to hang out with my dad, who I boldly say without any hesitation that my dad is 82 years of age. He's soon to be 83. That my dad has Parkinson's and early dementia, but I got to tell you, he is as much a man today as he ever was. And I wanted to just say that because I want to say to all of you all who are middle age, who are watching your parents age, please don't think less of your parents as you see them age and as you begin to take care of them. They are still amazing. We hope that we get to live as long as they do, and that we hope that we're also loving our children and loving people, so that when we get to that place, that there will be people who will love us and appreciate us and will be around to take care of us. But I thoroughly enjoy hanging out with them, but I'm glad to be back in Wichita with the St. Mark family. And now we're headed into this final month. And tonight and the next couple of weeks, we have some great guests coming before you. This guest tonight is an amazing young man that I can't wait to pick his brain with you tonight. take a moment, tag some folks, invite them to come on with you. If you're watching on my Facebook profile, I want to encourage you to go over to the St. Mark Facebook page, the St. Mark Facebook page, St. Mark United Methodist Church, Wichita, Kansas. Go to that page, and so that because we want to get your feedback, we want you to talk with us as we're engaged in conversation tonight. If you comment on my profile, we won't see your comments. So go to the St. Mark page. But we have Dr. Rickey Booker here with us tonight. Kai Green is going to introduce him to you in just a second. But in addition to that, on next week, we have an amazing guest, a local here with us. Chief Ramsey will be with us from here right here in Wichita, and who's an outstanding human being. We have so much respect for him from the St. Mark community, but he's going to be on with us. And then on the 15th, we will broadcast a conversation with the guest that we've had on before, and we'll say more about him at a later date. We're getting ready for 2022. And again, as Pastor Yolanda has said to you all so many times before, if you know of people that you know are remarkable people who are doing fascinating, impactful things in their community, in their church, in their city, and you want them to come on, you like to see us interview them, you like to hear an interview with them, please send us. You can type their names into the comments. Send us their name and information. Help us get in contact with them, because we definitely want to broaden our audience and bring lots of folks on with us to have these amazing conversations. I believe, before I bring my co-host on, I believe that courageous conversations, that is one of the ways that we can heal our world and build bridges between broken in a divided world, is just with having courageous conversations. I believe that people hate each other because they don't know each other. As people get to know each other and see people from different perspectives, they learn to appreciate people, or at least not be so judgmental. It's not going to solve having conversations doesn't solve all the problems, but it's at least one way of beginning to push through this, what I see as this darkness of division in our country that's growing day by day. This very day, SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, was debating birth justice, what I call birth justice, the right of women to own their bodies, and then debate about that. And so that's just brought another issue of division. People seem to be at each other's throats. So we're trying to build bridges of understanding. And we think that one way to do that is through healthy, positive, and courageous conversation. So thank you all for tuning in on Wednesdays. And we promise to keep it coming. And to keep it exciting and keep it dynamic. We want you every Wednesday night. We want you to learn a little. We want you to cry a little. We want you to laugh a little, and we want you to dream a lot. And so we pray that happens when you watch our broadcast and engage with us. Let me bring on my co-host. I don't know if she's going to be able to talk tonight, but let me bring on just so she can at least wave to you. But we want to welcome Pastor Yolanda Oliver to our broadcast tonight. Good evening, Pastor.
Good evening. How are you?
So there it is. Now, I don't know, Dr. Booker, you in the background now, you all will see him in just a second. I don't know if that's really something real going on, or somebody just like.
I'm just trying to get a day off. That's all.
What comes on Netflix tonight? Is one of those like King of Thrones? I don't even watch them. Is one of those on tonight?
We can't do Netflix. We have assignments due. We got homework.
Okay. We'll trust that. Well, thank you for coming on and helping us to navigate the platform. We use this amazing platform, folks, called StreamYard. And I really like it. You can, we can share at some point, share more with you about it. If you're a church that's watching and you're trying to find ways to do these kinds of presentations, St. Mark maybe can help you a little. We are not experts by any stretch of the imagination, but we've been doing this. And so maybe we can mentor a church who's not as far along this journey of using technology as we are. I'd like to bring on our other co-host, Minister Kai Green, who is a professional in diversity and equity and inclusion, but also a theology student at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. and on a full ride, by the way, because of his amazing credentials, but an outstanding young man that I got to meet. St. Mark, you know him, that I got to meet, about 10 years ago? It's been about almost 9 years ago. No, about 7 years ago. About 7 years ago, we got a chance for about a year and a half to work together in an amazing place in South Central Texas. And thank God that our friendship blossomed there and took off and is intact today. And so I love him, appreciate him. So he is in Austin, Texas, but he helps us to host our Ignite conversations. Then Pastor Kyle Kockelmeyer, who is right here in the city of Wichita, who is a pastor in the Evangelical Covenant Church, and is now one of our co-hosts, and we enjoy having him on. He blessed us has connected us with David Swanson, connected us with the amazing person who we had the conversation about Sankofa. Follow up on. We had
Dominique Gilliard was on.
Gilliard, yes. As a matter of fact, Dominique Gilliard, folks, if you all enjoy that conversation with Dominique Gilliard, he is on the most recent podcast of Holy Post.
Yep.
Holy Post is a great podcast that I listen to. I encourage you, if you're watching me tonight, if you're listening to me right now, go listen to that podcast. Make that one of your listens. He is on the most recent podcast, and as he did when he came on with us, doing some amazing stuff, both in the Evangelical Covenant Church and beyond, just creative work, which I think theology has to be both critical but constructive also. You know, so much of what people do in theology is critical, but we never get to the part of being constructive. And he's doing constructive stuff, including writing curriculum for all ages that helps people to embrace an open mind and inclusiveness from a biblical perspective. So he's on their most recent podcast. And then we have another amazing young man on with us tonight. And so I'm going to have Kai. Well, first of all, let's let Kai and Kyle greet y'all post-Thanksgiving greeting.
I'm just cracking up here on your understanding of technology. What's on Netflix tonight? I need to check my TV guide to see what's on Netflix.
What's
tonight,
on
Robert.
Netflix? What's playing? You understand it's streaming, so you're in control. You go watch what you want to watch when you want to watch it.
Oh, wow.
Hey, I was really trying to use language that I thought Yolanda might know.
No. Let's not do that.
Let's not pick on the woman who can't talk tonight.
Right. Everybody stretch your hand towards your camera. Pray for Robert. Cover him.
Send it. Hello, Mom. My mom says good evening to all of you all. Dr. Booker, my mom watches on every Wednesday night. So she's on again tonight. Hello, Mom. Thank you for tuning in. Folks, again, if you're watching, tag some folks, invite them to come on. You don't want to miss this conversation with this brilliant mind. And so here we go. Kai, you want to invite and bring him on? And
yeah, for sure. So listen, I'm super excited to invite this gentleman to be on with us tonight. Dr. Rickey Booker. Rickey and I actually completed undergrad together at Arkansas Monticello, fighting boll weevils. So all of my UAM people, if you're watching this, tag, let's support one another. Yeah. Y'all know the call. Don't ask me. That's Rick. He knows what I'm talking about. Rickey is the associate trainer, facilitator, and consultant for the Ideals Institute at the University of Arkansas. Dr. Booker is a native of Warren, Arkansas, and earned his Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Arkansas Monticello in health and physical education with the emphasis on wellness leadership. He obtained his Master's of Education in 2006 and Doctorate in Workforce Development Education in 2011. From the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. Go Hogs. He has worked in higher education for 16 years, and most recently worked as the Director of Career Programs for the University Career Development Center at the University of Arkansas Fayetteville. And one other thing about him, two other things I look to dig into tonight. Number one, Dr. Booker has also been a trustee for the past 7 years at the historic St. James Missionary Baptist Church in Fayetteville, Arkansas. The church has a beautiful history. I hope we can touch on that a little bit. And then also, Rickey is a columnist for the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette. For you all that don't know it, Rickey is a young African-American man. I believe Arkansas is about 76% white, about 15% maybe black. So as we talk about some of the articles and you go read his blog, we'll share that with you. As you read through some of the things that he writes in the context of where he is in Northwest Arkansas, there's a lot of appreciation for the ideas and the challenges that he's laying forth to the community and how he's living his life. So I thought he'd be a great person to have on just to talk about your calling, your vocation, how those things go together, and just to share some inspiration with us on how we can grow as believers and be more, say it with me, more engaged in our local community. So everybody, put your hands together virtually for Dr. Rickey Booker. Monticello people, yeah. Y'all know what to do.
I can't believe he got you to do that. I've got to go to a game there now.
Oh, yes, Bo Weevil.
By the way, before he gets started, I just want to jump in real quick and say good evening to Marsha, Pastor Marsha Haney, our good friend of St. Mark's and ours here in the city of Wichita. Hello, Pastor Haney, soon to be Bishop Haney. Right, Yolanda?
Yolanda's like,
Speak prophetically.
Rickey, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on, sir. Thank you so much. We deeply appreciate this. Kai, take us. Let's roll.
Yeah. So listen, like I said, Rick and I went to school together, University of Arkansas at Monticello. Now we find ourselves some years later trying to navigate what we're going to do in the world and kind of where we find ourselves. So Rick, if you would, just for a moment, would you just kind of walk us through your story, a little bit about your upbringing, where you went to school, what you focused on, and how you've landed now in the DE&I space and with the Ideals Institute.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you all today. So I'll just kind of start, where I'm from. I'm from a little small town in southeast Arkansas. It's called Warren, Arkansas. About 5,000 people from that town. It's a mostly Southern white and Black Christian community there. And I'm a product of the Church of God in Christ. I'm a product of Kojic.
Wow.
And so my church in Warren was a powerhouse Church of God in Christ. But I attend St. James Missionary Baptist Church here in Fayetteville. But I do want to say that I'm just kind of a little bit about my, growing up, I'm a product definitely of a single parent mother. I have 3 sisters, and so I was the only boy in our family. And so my mom would tell me all the time, "You're the man of the house. I need you to help." And so I think about my mom, she was an LPN for about, I would say maybe 12 years, trying to raise 4 kids by herself. And during that time, she decided to go back to school to get her registered nursing degree. So we spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house while she worked by day and went to school by night to get her registered nursing degree. And she always told us that she just wanted to get her degree so she can make a better life for us. And so she did get her degree. She did. And then later in life, she ended up getting a master's in health administration. I'm also a product of the TRIO programs. So I attended the Upward Bound program at the University of Arkansas Monticello from 9th grade through 12th grade. And so, to be a part of that program, you have to be a first generation low income student. I definitely met that criteria. And so that program really helped me. And I call that an equity focused program. I know a lot of times people talk about individual access and help, but I really think the Upward Bound and TRIO programs are equity focused programs. I'm also a part of the student support services when I was in college. Definitely took advantage of that TRIO program, really helped me. So I graduated high school in 1999, attended UAM with Kai. So yeah, we were on the yard there, and I pledged Omega Psi Phi fraternity, the greatest fraternity in the land.
Can I, let me, I'm going to interrupt him here for 1 second, y'all. And let me tell y'all something else, too.
You know the emoji that goes like.
Yeah. Listen, it's only a select few people that have a real appreciation for what I'm about to say. Number one, I was in Bankston Hall, and we could tell you stories. Rick was a hardworking guy. He was a RA, man. And Rick had the cleanest Lincoln. That Lincoln, I don't know if you still have it. I don't know what year model it was. Y'all, this brother like that car stayed clean. And in the beginning, I was really trying to figure out, man, what do I think about this dude? Because everything was like, he always did what he was supposed to do. Stuff was in order. His car was always clean, but he's also my RA. And I was trying to figure out, man, how cool is this dude? Man, he's an Omega. I don't know how it's all this going to go. But I wanted to take this time to say this, man. From the moment I stepped foot on campus at UAM, brother, you always carried yourself differently. And people say a lot of stuff about Greek stuff and all of that. But I'm going to tell you something, man. You are truly a man's man. You carried yourself like that then. And then to kind of reconnect with you now, read through your blogs and see what you're doing, man, my respect for you has grown tenfold. I always knew you were a good person, but to see where you are now, man, it makes so much sense. So I just wanted to plug that in. Please continue.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate it. So the Lincoln is a 1988 Lincoln Town car. It was white and had the burgundy rag top. And I got that from my grandfather. So my grandfather actually had that car. And when he passed away, my aunt actually gave it to me. So I had that car for a number of years. And as you know, I had some 100 spokes and Vogues on there. So I had the rims, 100 spokes and Vogues. It was clean. It was clean.
Y'all don't know.
Oh yes. So yeah, we had some great times at UAM, absolutely. But I'm with you. There's only a few people who really know about that. And so I graduated from UAM in 2004 and came to the University of Arkansas to pursue my master's in higher education. And I definitely got to give some love to Kelly Johnson, Miss Kelly Johnson. She actually really pushed me to apply for grad school because I was planning on going into the military because I have a lot of family that are in the military. I was going to go into the officers program, into the Air Force. And she was like, you need to go to grad school. She's like, you need to go to grad school in Fayetteville. So I applied and got an interview and got accepted in. So I really appreciate her because I wouldn't be where I'm at today without her encouraging me to do that. And so then I started working full time here at the University of Arkansas in 2005. And ironically, I started working as an academic counselor for the Upward Bound program here on campus. So the same program that had helped me, now here I am working with those students. And I did when I was in college every summer. I was a mentor every single summer in college in Monticello for the program. And so I worked full time for that program for 5.5 years. After about 2 years, I got promoted to director of a program, and it was really exciting because we had 3 Upward Bound programs here on campus. I think they have either 4 or 5 now, but one of the programs that I got the director for, the student population was 95% Hispanic, Latinx, or Marshallese, and so I really got to learn a lot about those communities and their families, and we had to adjust how we actually gave some of our services to meet the needs of our families. So that really just helped me learn more about the Marshallese and the Hispanic, Latinx culture. And so during that time, I also met my beautiful wife here in Fayetteville, Rickey Booker. And so I met her, and we have a 4.5-year-old daughter. Her name is Taylor, the joy of our life. And in 2011, I transitioned over to the University Career Development Center. I was in that role as Associate Director for Career Programs, where I managed all of our career fairs and professional development events. And then eventually, I got promoted to Director of Career Programs. And so I worked in that department for 8.5 years. And about almost 3 years ago, I transitioned over to the Ideals Institute. And I've been working in this role now for, again, almost 3 years. And during the time while I've been working full time at the university, I found some time to go to school and get my doctorate in workforce development education. So I've been very thankful for the people that have helped me along the way, and also the equity focused programs that have helped me and my family.
Wow. Wow. So that is quite the journey. I hope everybody caught that. Trio programs. He said, you're born and raised, man, I was Cogent. That's where I was. That's where I started my journey. And now you've been through these different experiences. You find yourself in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'll hand it over to Robert for the next question.
So before I do that question, I just want to take a moment to say, by the way, so is there a relationship between UAM and University of Arkansas Fayetteville?
So it's a part of the same system.
That's what I mean.
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
But I just want to say that Fayetteville, Arkansas is beautiful. So, folks, if you get a chance to come through there. So now we go through Arkansas, of course, headed to Mississippi when we go home. My family, when we travel, when we drive home, it's about a 45-minute detour, but we went through there on the way back just so we could see, and the whole time we just kept saying this is beautiful here. So once you get to the campus and then the little town around Fayetteville around the campus is one of the most beautiful college towns in the country. So just a great place to go to school. So would you take a moment, Rick, and walk us through your journey towards pursuing your diversity, equity, and inclusion as an expression of your faith? So how did you, what was the journey of you including that as a part of your faith expression?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking me that. My journey, I would definitely say, was not at all intentional. It was somewhat organic, or as my mom would say, it was a part of God's plan for my life. And so over my at the time, I've been working at the university now for 16 years, but at the time I had been working at the university for 13 years. When I think about it, I served on several DEI committees, but I had never had any plans to work in DEI full time. And so now that I do work in the Ideals Institute, and I do just want to take a moment to kind of tell you all kind of what we do in the Ideals Institute
Yes,
here at the
yes,
university. So it
yes.
was created about 3 years ago by the chancellor. It's a part of the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at the university. And so Ideals is a training, research, and consultancy institute, and it's dedicated to creating diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplaces and communities. And so while we are a U of A department, about 90% of our time is spent working externally with nonprofits, for profits, and school districts. And so we actually people will contact us, or we may go out and we tell people about what we do, and then we'll send them a proposal. And so what we will do is we have a minimum 6-month contract that people will have to engage with us if they want to work with us up to 5 years. So we're not an organization that you will call if you want someone to just come in and do implicit bias training. We're really about transformational change. And so we use what is called that we created a P3 model of systems change. And we believe that in order to have transformational change, that you have to have engagement at all of our levels on the P3, which is people, processes, and power. And so to
Mm,
do this, what we do is we engage people as they analyze, learn, and reimagine an inclusive environment. We also work to examine and measure policies, practices, and processes against the organization's aspire values, what they say they're all about. And then lastly, we'll equip those leaders with those equitable decision-making strategies to kind of challenge some of those power structures that are inequitable. And so for me, when I think about, working in DEI and then also my expression of my faith, I think about that kind of what I've learned over this time. And I really have learned a lot about my dominant culture identities versus my non-dominant culture identities. And so I'm going to give you some examples of those in just a second. But when I talk about those dominant cultural identities, I'm talking about those identities that have kind of the most power or the most representation when it comes to designing spaces, places, and culture for a specific identity. And then when I'm talking about those non-dominant cultural identities, I'm talking about identities that actually tend to have less power or representation in places and are less visible in decision-making spaces. And so some of those examples, which we like to really lean into because we want people to kind of understand is when you look at a dominant culture, you may see that white people are the dominant culture in our society. And then as a person of color, that's non-dominant. Able-bodied people, that's dominant culture. People with disabilities is non-dominant. Someone who is cis straight is dominant versus someone who is in LGBTQ community, which is non-dominant. Christian, I identify as a Christian. That's dominant culture identity. Someone who's non-dominant would be someone that's a non-Christian. So when I think about how DEI has been an expression of my faith, I think about how I've been really able to lean into I would say, Matthew 22:37 and 39. I'm going to paraphrase here where, it talks about, love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself, the two greatest commandments. And to do this, I truly believe that our promises or our values that we espouse, our orthodoxy, what we believe about love, have to actually align with the practices or our orthopraxy, what we actually do. And so, in thinking about that, thinking about love, I personally do not subscribe to the phrase that I've heard so many people say since I was a little kid, which is, love the sinner but hate the sin. And I'll explain that, and then I'll pause. So, from an anecdotal standpoint, most folks that I know who subscribe to that phrase don't actually have genuine or authentic relationships with folks who, for example, may be in the LGBTQ community. And from a data perspective, there have been research studies conducted that showed how people who heard the phrase, I love the sinner but hate the sin, kind of frequently they attend religious organizations, and they have that strong linked negative attitude toward folks in the LGBTQ community. So when people say, I love the sinner, but I hate the sin, I feel that it enables people to kind of maintain their negative attitudes without feeling like they're a prejudiced person. But I would say that overcoming prejudice just doesn't magically happen, by simply using, I guess I would use more palatable language to cover up for that prejudice. So for me, love is actionable, and it actually starts with relationships, particularly with those who may hold an identity by which I may be unfamiliar. And so this is kind of the expression of my faith with DEI.
Wow. Wow.
Wow. I hope I don't derail us too bad. I want to pivot back for 1 second because you were talking about, DE and I, and again, we're both in that space. And I had that same experience that you have, right? So when I'm trying to navigate in communities that might be unfamiliar to me or non-dominant, out of my norm, it's really that opportunity to love my neighbors as myself. But you said you all use a model. It was the 3 Ps. It was power. What was it?
Yes, the P3 model of systems change. And so it's people, processes, and power.
Okay, so people, processes, and power. And I know that we got people watching this, and sometimes it's hard for folks to connect the dots. But these same dynamics that we're talking about with diversity, equity, and inclusion, honestly, these are some of the same principles when I'm working with churches. Like, we're looking at these same ideals or concepts that are prevalent in the world. It's prevalent at the church. So if you all are listening to this and you're wondering, like, how do we start to affect change in our church? Maybe the 3 Ps is something to actually consider. What does power look like in your church, and how do we use it, right? So I just wanted to plug that in for people in case they're not connecting the dots.
Absolutely.
These principles, people, process, and power, these are the same questions as church leaders we should be asking. How are we using these concepts within our midst? Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Kyle, you're so right. As a matter of fact, Pastor Kyle he probably has a little bit to say about that, because one of his areas of focus right now is understanding power and how power, how we use it in church, and then how we use it in the community at large in ways that are oppressive to others. But that was also part of the conversation we have with Dominique Gilliard, is that he talks about it in the sense of privilege, which is a form of power. And he based and going through the Bible and talking about ways that not rejecting privilege, not demonizing it, but redeeming privilege so that people begin to use it in ways that are helpful towards others, that demonstrate the love ethic that you refer to, Dr. Booker, the love ethic that comes out of the scripture you read: love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. That love ethic, that how we handle privilege and power should reflect our commitment to the love ethic. So absolutely. I've got to ask you guys this. Both of you all work in DEI, and so my first question is, how long has DEI been an established initiative in corporate America and academic institutions? Do you? I mean, is it relatively new? Is it over the last 20, 15, 20 years? When has, so that now I think almost every major university has a DEI department. It's in, because, go
Okay.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
Because my pivot, I'm pivoting from that question to ask you, are you all aware that part of the push against illegitimately against CRT, that they're beginning to drop the CRT language and they're beginning to talk about DEI? Are you all aware of that? And how do you feel about that?
Okay.
Yes, I'm very familiar with it, and I would say I didn't want to jump in front of Kai, but yeah, I would definitely say that the DEI really took hold in the early 2000s.
Okay.
There have always been, I would probably say since the 80s and 90s, there's always been African American studies in those departments who were fighting for, well, we need more substantive help, we need more visibility. And so DEI really started to take hold in the early 2000s, where you saw it starting to spread across different universities. And I would also agree that yes, CRT has been lumped in, and I will say that on my blog, I actually back in May, I actually wrote a post about it, and I will say that pretty much all of my writings that are on my blog are also in the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette, because I write for them. But then they also allow me to put it on my webpage, because I like to put pictures and things, add things to it. But I wrote a blog about critical race theory, and my title was just "Critical Race Theory is Not the Boogeyman." And I really went into explaining how it even got as prominent as it is today. Many people may not know who Christopher Rufo is, but Christopher Rufo is a guy who really kind of really ginned up this, movement that we see now. And he basically said that I'm gonna get people so riled up that I'm gonna make sure every time anybody mentions diversity, equity, or inclusion, or race or racism, we can just lump it all into this category.
Wow.
But also in my article, what I talked about how it also became really to the forefront because of the Southern Baptist Convention. And I really talked about how that, what happened at the Southern Baptist Convention. I would just really encourage people to just go to my blog and read it, and you can really see how at the time, Pastor J.D. Greer, who was over the Southern Baptist Convention, he had put he put 10 people, this is just committee together to establish, this plan of what are we going to do as we move forward with the Christian Southern Baptist Convention. So he put this team of 10 people together. 6 of the 10 people were people of color. And so when they came back, one of the things they came back was with is that they needed to use some components of CRT within the church. And again, didn't subscribe to all of the components, but Pastor Curtis Wood, who is a Black pastor, he said that some of these components can really help us see and understand the pain and the plight of people of color and what they've been going through. And initially, it was accepted, but then of course, President Donald Trump came out with the executive order, and from that point on, it just became demonized and got bigger and bigger. And that's when Christopher Rufo took over and made it as big as it is. But I really try to help people understand that it's not what people are making it out to be.
Yeah, and going along with Dr. Booker was saying. So for me, I've watched DE&I really become a thing again, more so the last 10, 15 years, speaking more so from a corporate perspective. Previously, what you heard a lot, at least in the circles I ran in, what I heard a lot in the corporate space, you heard things like culture and core values. And so if you go scour different places, and even honestly doing church consulting during that time, that was one of the phrases that I used, because we would say, what's the identity of your church, right? What do you want people to think of, therefore ergo feel? And corporate entities were doing the same thing, right? Coming up with these core values because they're trying to kind of herd cats into the direction of creating this ethos, right? So maybe it's integrity, maybe it's authenticity and perseverance, but these were words that you would hear, kind of thrown around corporate circles. And then as it relates to things conflicting between DEI and CRT, it really, I would say personally, I'll just say personally, it stresses me out when people try to lump the two together. To me, CRT is a framework by which to understand systems and how things interplay and why they're there. Diversity, equity, inclusion is the work of combating that system. And so they're two different buckets. And then I think the third part of this, or another thing that becomes a challenge, which I hope I don't jump too far ahead, because Rick has an amazing blog where he talks about this idea of council culture. So I'll couch part of what I'm going to say, but the other thing that I do want to highlight is that when we talk diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think it's also important that we center the word moderation, because people hear diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I think everybody thinks a light switch. It's absolute, it's all or nothing, everything's got to be this way. And I don't believe that is the core of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I believe it is a process. I believe it does take us making progress, but it is not this harsh, dogmatic absolutism that people make it out to be. Yeah.
So it feels like to me that with DEI, that we were at a place in our country where it was kind of, although people understood it differently, although people had different levels in which they embraced the need for it, but that was a general consensus that this is a good thing and it can help us be more aware of the issues that DEI addresses in the workplace and other places. But it feels like now we're in a place where we're having to defend the presence of it at all. Like, the question is no longer how do we dig into it, or what parts of it are helpful, what parts are not helpful. This is like, right. Do you all see, has been, and how, as professionals in the field, how are you all how are you encountering and engaging with that? How are you feeling about that? How are you working through that?
Yeah, I would just say that it has been challenging at times. You know, not getting too deep into it, but at times, you get emails from people, or I know we have this specific person that definitely makes sure that they email us a lot and ask us questions, and we get FOIA and things like that because we work here at the University of Arkansas. But we're very committed. We're very committed to what we're doing. We do have support from leadership. We do have support from a lot of people in the community. And I don't want to jump too far ahead, but one of the things I'll say, and I'll touch on this a little later, is whenever there has always been a call for equality and justice, specifically for the least of these, there has always been a response.
Yeah.
Always. And so I'm not surprised by what we're seeing right now when it comes to people trying to lump D&I into critical race theory and trying to demonize critical race theory, which there's nothing to demonize there. But I'm not surprised when you see that, or when we see that. But again, every time there's a call for equality and justice, or even just to listen to the experiences that people of color, or again, non-dominant identities have been through, there's always been a response. So
Absolutely. And the thing you said earlier, Rick, you were one of the, I guess, Christian cliches that gets thrown around, that idea, hate the sin and not the sinner. But the point that you made is that what can I say? Kind of when we tear down the straw man, right? When we take away this fake shield that you've been allowed to use to, make yourself, to placate yourself, basically, and you're forced to actually deal with you know what? Let me take that back. Let me take a part of that back. I was about to say you're forced to deal with the reality of the world, but no, you're forced to deal with the actuality of your decisions and your behavior. And I think that's the hard part with DE&I and CRT. They push you past your reality and force you to look at actuality. And ergo, there comes the conflict. Because it's the same in our Christian walk, right? I'm cool to go to John's church down the street because they don't condemn what I do, or what I do is not the sin that is bashed upon. That happens elsewhere. So we do that in different walks of life. And when people call our bluff, nobody likes to look in the mirror.
No doubt. No doubt.
That's good. So I'm curious, what are some of the questions that you're trying to reconcile between DE and I and your faith? Like kind of bringing us back to your kind of your journey and especially how it relates to your faith. Were there some questions that you were trying to reconcile between the two?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I would say absolutely, yeah. I would. I guess I'll start with social justice, which I know social justice is different from DE and I, but it kind of has an arm there. Kind of has an arm on D and I. Um, but I think about when you look at social justice and just kind of reconciling that with my faith. I think about the history of black pain in this country, and I'm going to lean into black identity because I'm a black man and kind of understand that. And I just want to kind of walk through something really quick. So I want y'all to kind of bear with me. I think about, from 1619 when the first enslaved Africans came here on the slave ship San Juan Batista. And then I also think about to the 13th Amendment, which actually freed enslaved black bodies in 1865. I also think about the Reconstruction era, which we saw some gains. I mean, a lot of historians say that that was the most prosperous time for
Yes.
Black folks in this country. I also think about in 1877, where many of our civil rights began to slowly kind of get rolled back because of the Great Compromise. And then I think about, when I kind of jumped to 1964, where we saw almost, up to then we saw 100 years of Jim Crow segregation, where almost 3,500 blacks were lynched, and this was what was recorded. So I'm very sure there were definitely more than 3,500.
Right.
To the 1980s and 1990s, where we saw the mass incarceration of black men, to the present day, where we've seen, and I'm just kind of leaning to a couple of research studies that are coming to my mind in 2017 and 2020. Roland Fryer, who is an economist for Harvard University, did an amazing study where he brought in a lot of data where you could see where blacks and Hispanics are 53% more likely to experience non-lethal uses of excessive force by police, such as putting their hands on a civilian, pointing a weapon at them, pushing them into the wall or into the ground, and even striking them with the baton. 53% more likely. And he also states that, he found that even when officers report, not civilians, but when officers report that civilians had been compliant and no arrest was made, that blacks were 21% more likely to endure some form
Mm.
of force in that interaction. And that just blew my mind when I looked at that. And so I say all of that to say, has faith played a role in us getting to where we are today, far as overcoming a lot of those things? Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. And I give a lot of that to my mom and to my mentors and to folks who really helped me understand my foundation. Um, but I will say that when I look at my Christian faith, I believe that it shouldn't be all about the black community and a few allies standing up for social justice in the face of 400 years of oppression and degradation. I believe that there has to be a response, a positive response in standing up from the white Christian community, and other Christian communities have a responsibility and a duty as well. And I will say that I've just kind of been blown away in regards to how large numbers of specifically, white evangelical pastors who claim to be preachers of the gospel, which says that we ought to be about, the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith, in Matthew 23 and 23. But nonetheless, there's often silence
Hmm.
from the pulpit about the current state of social justice. And for me, I
Hmm.
just feel like that's a problem. And that's something that I just kind of been wrestling with. And I don't say these things to elicit any guilt or shame or blame. I say this
Right.
because,
Right.
as a Christian
Right.
community, I feel we have a responsibility to stand up and speak out for the least of these.
It's a prophetic responsibility. And so it's not meant to be simply a guilt trip or shame inducing. It's really a desire to push and lean into the good news of the Prince of Peace. Robert, I don't know if you remember this. This was last year. I think it was during that series where you had Shauna Masheho on, and you briefly talked about reparations, and you. I'm so curious if this is something that you had been thinking about, or if this was an off the cuff comment. But you had talked about framing reparations for in the midst of, or at least among Christians, like separate from political conversations, but for the white Christians, reparations are doing the work of racial reconciliation and righteousness.
Yes.
That is
That's right.
what the white church can do.
Yep.
To make reparations in some ways, and I'm not sure if that I'm framing that as well as you did, but I just, that really struck me, and I appreciated that, and I thought that was a good way to frame the conversation of responsibility.
Yeah. It's just amazing, Carl, that somehow we've developed this version of Christianity that's all individualistic, and I mean that it bears no social or communal responsibility. And I don't know, like that's illogical to me, because the love ethic is about community. The kingdom is a community. When we say, so I often ask people when they push back against some of the push for social justice and for these kinds of issues, leveraging redeeming privilege for the sake of those who are the least and the last. They get into, well, that's not the gospel, but I'm like, but that's the gospel that Jesus preached.
Yeah.
And it's so clear. I mean, it's the scripture says the good news. He came bringing the good news. And what was that good news? That the kingdom is here, and the kingdom essentially is a community. So there's a way to be deeply Christian without being fundamentally oriented towards community. So it's all about how you treat others. Go ahead, Kyle.
No, and because we, especially within evangelicalism, how we have defined the gospel is you're a sinner, you need God, you're estranged from God. Jesus died for your sins so you can go to heaven.
Right.
And so when you define the gospel so narrowly, that's why I honestly try to avoid using the word gospel.
Yeah.
Because it's a translation of the good news. So Jesus went from village to village preaching the good news.
The good news.
And what he did wasn't, you're estranged from me, I'm going to die for your sins so you can go to heaven. That's not what we see in the Gospels.
Right.
Because when John sends his disciples to Jesus, like, hey, are you really the one that's to come? He says, look at what's happening. The people are healed. People are taken care of. There's restoration that is happening. There's good news to the poor. And that's the gospel. That's the good news, that we have a God that is a reconciler, who is a healer, who is a liberator. And if we just narrow it down to individual salvation, we are missing a huge portion of the good news of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
I'm over here having a Robert moment. In my head, I keep going, amazing. Wow. Because
Wow.
I say wow.
Wow.
Yolanda says amazing. I say wow.
no,
It's
I'm
amazing
gonna,
that Yolanda's work. You're missing it, Dr. Booker, because usually you get like amazing. Everything is like amazing.
Robert says it all the time. But look, I'm gonna put my finger up here. Look, I'm dragging the time marker back a second because Kyle, sometimes people say something and then it just like your ears just go, wait a minute. But in response to something Rickey was saying about this around, just speaking truth, right? And saying things that might make us a little bit uncomfortable. But I don't know if people heard this. Kyle said, but it's not about getting mad. It's not about reacting. But he said it's about it's a prophetic. Oh my God. Like when he said that, he said it's a prophetic response.
Yes.
It is a prophetic response, right? So and as he said that, what kept going over in my mind, I'm overwhelmed by the gift that Jesus Christ has really given us, because a part of the gift that we get from Jesus Christ, again, it is not just going to heaven, right? It is not that I can have all the heels of cattle on the heads of the cattle on the hill. That is not it. But it is the ability to stand in the truth of where we are, to look our shortcomings in the face, to hear the things that are difficult, and yet find the courage to face them and the power to change them.
Yes.
That is the gift of Christ. You don't have to stay where you are. So Kyle, dude, you've lit my little soul on fire. Every time we're just gonna start telling people, stop getting mad, find your prophetic response. Where is your prophetic response? But again, people, listen. That is really.
Kyle, do not try that on your wife. Do not try that on your wife. Do not say something to her when she gets ticked off. Do not say that's just my prophetic response.
We're still early in.
Yeah, that will not work, bro.
We're still early in. I can get away with it. But man, I got to, y'all. I just have to say that again. That is the beauty of Christ.
Yes.
The strength to have a prophetic response, to stand in truth and power, to hear and change, man. That is a gift. Thank you for that.
And to be healed, which is why the idea of pushing back against diversity, equity, inclusion as Christians makes no sense.
Makes no sense.
Because it is for our liberation.
Makes no sense.
It is not for me to liberate somebody else. It is for me to be liberated. Woo! I'm just preaching to myself here.
Right.
Yes. No, you're preaching to me. You're preaching to all of us. You're preaching to all of us because Kyle, like the deeper I pressed into the message of the Christian faith, the deeper I pressed into it, this is what I was left with. This is what I came when Kyle talks about being able to face the truth of who you are and where you. It was the truth that if I'm not working to see the humanity of every person I encounter, then I am totally missing the kingdom message. Because no matter how you color it, no matter what theological language you use, no matter what denominational or religious, at the heart of who Jesus was that he was constantly saying everybody matters.
Right.
And it's not like it's not turning that Kyle into, okay, who doesn't treat me like I matter? Like, so then I can deal with the racism. But no, who are the people that I exclude? Who are the people that I am I hold on to my dominance. What was your language, Doctor? The dominant
cultural identity.
Dominant cultural identity, and won't give it up for the sake of, and that until I'm ready to dig into that and release that power and to affirm the humanity of people with whom I vehemently disagree, then like I am missing the essence of who Jesus is and who he's called me to be. So absolutely, yes. So it doesn't make sense, Kyle, for people to be against it because that's where we walk into our own humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. You know, and I think this is I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit because I think this is the perfect segue. You know, we were talking about CRT, talking about DEI, and we talked about there's this hesitation that people have and this fear that when this stuff comes at them, that it's just going to be so overwhelming and how it's going to be done. Well, Dr. Booker wrote an article here recently. I hope I get the title right, but it's like what to cancel. Is that I think when to cancel or what to cancel?
What needs counseling?
What needs counseling?
So it's the article is called "What Needs Canceling," and so we all have heard about cancel culture and in this. But Dr. Booker, could you just kind of give us a brief synopsis of that article and the ideas in there? Because I think that this might help somebody that's afraid of DE&I, and then also help those who might be maybe more liberal in processing what it means to hold people accountable and to have the right prophetic response. Would you share a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I'll just be honest with you. I've been working on this piece for probably about 5 months. I just kept going back to putting it down, going back, putting it down because council culture has been around now for a while. People have been talking about it for a couple of years now. Um, but what I like to do is I like to use real life narratives in some of my pieces. And so what I did was I went out and I really just did some research and I pulled in a story from a guy named Frank Mink, who is a former skinhead. And he actually, his life story actually inspired the movie American History X. I don't know if any of y'all have seen that from
See,
1998.
yes, great movie.
Yes. So so again, it inspired the movie. It wasn't exactly about him, but inspired the movie. And so what I did was I just kind of talked about Frank's story, and he talked about how he was a skinhead, and when he was young, he and these guys would get together and they would go out and do what he would call missions, and those missions would be it could be spray painting a synagogue, it could be what he called going gay bashing or homeless bashing, or fighting folks on the left is what he would say. And so what he did one day though, him and one of his buddies got a guy, they kidnapped him, tied him up, and they beat him almost to death, and that landed him in prison. So when he went to prison, again, he had really his whole life been around skinheads, mostly all white people. And when he went to prison, he actually started connecting with people who were Latinx, Hispanic, and black guys, and they would play football together. And he said they always would talk about things that they had in common. What did he talk about in his autobiography? He talks about that they would talk about women. They would talk about women. Oh, this woman, and just thinking about those things. And they also would talk about some of the things they would have in common around food and things like that. And so he said he really made some good close friendships with a lot of those guys in prison that he had never made in his life. So when he got out of prison, he connected back up with the skinheads. And over a period of a few months, he realized that this is not me anymore. This is not who I am. And so he basically just moved away and completely got out of skinhead. He had this huge swastika on his neck. He got that covered up and really just started to change his life. And so what he did was he started volunteering for the Philadelphia Flyers, which is a hockey team. And he created this program called Harmony Through Hockey, which gives youth a way to be engaged and stay out of violence. And so he did that in a way to really try to keep youth away from white supremacy, is what he talked about, because that's what really pulled him in. And so then I go into the article and I talk a little bit about cancel culture, and I bring in some academic researchers, and I talk about that counseling has been viewed as a survival skill as old as the boycott in the black community, where you look at the Christian Leadership Conference in 1962, Operation Breadbasket, and Dr. King talks about that, and he talked about that the fundamental premise of Breadbasket was to basically say that Negroes don't need to patronize businesses which denies them jobs, or advancement, or just even plain courtesy. And so that was their way of counseling those businesses. And then I also talk a little bit about that we can assume that the original American council culture was in 1773 when frustrated and angry American colonists dumped the tea in the harbor. We could consider that council culture. But then I also kind of lean in And I say that, in the mid 90s, we didn't have cancel culture like it is now. And I said that, Frank, he didn't have to face what we have now, which is the cancel culture mind. Rather, he experienced what I would consider to be redemption culture, which held him accountable for what he did and
Mhm.
his actions, but allowed him to grow and evolve into the person that he is today. And so, what I end the article with, and I
Yes.
think that this is, for me, it was really important, is that I said that, for all of us, and we know it to be true, we don't have to make the same mistakes as someone else. We can see someone else's mistakes and say, okay, I'm not going to make that mistake. I'm going to learn because I saw this person make a mistake. And so I said that I believe that instead of canceling individuals, we as Americans need to get very serious about canceling deeply rooted toxic ideologies within our society. And I said we can start with white supremacy.
Hmm.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So
Yeah.
you all can find that article on his blog, and there's the link to both the blog and that specific article. Uh, I got started, kind of skimmed it and got into the first parts of it. It's a phenomenal piece of work. So we want to encourage you all to go and check it out. I just want to highlight your mom saying good, speaking to us and saying she is godly proud of her son, Dr. Rickey Booker Jr. That's nothing better than when your comes on. Then when your mom comes on and says, "Great job! I'm so proud of you." So Kai, if I may, I mean I think Rick is such a smart guy. His rooted in the church, grew up in the Church of God in Christ. Now, as a member of the Baptist Church, has a beautiful young family. Uh, Talk to some. We have some young adults that we're cultivating and nurturing here within the St. Mark community, who are exploring the concept of call. And I know if that's a switch of directions in our conversation, but can you talk a little about how that journey has been for you in terms of discovering your why and like connecting with mentors? What's that journey been like for you?
Yeah, uh, absolutely. I think about it. So, I I love that you said discovering my why, because one of the things we did when I first started working in the Ideals Institute is we had to we worked with an amazing woman named Sarah Bishop, and she worked with us on narrative. Like, we needed to have our own narrative. Like, why is this important to you? Why is DEI
Wow.
important to you? And so we've crafted our own narratives. But I'm not gonna go in deep into
Please
that.
share.
But
Please share a little
Mm.
of that. Please, please share a
We could
little.
spend a whole hour just on that.
Yeah,
oh yeah, we
exactly.
could.
Yeah.
We could
Please,
spend an
just give
hour.
us, just tease us a little bit. Just give us a little bit of that. That's so provocative. Please.
Well, what I will say is, I would say that, for me, as we spent, hours and hours really working on that, what I found out for myself is why this is so important to me is because it's kind of been like a journey. Again, as I told you at the beginning, my mom always tells me, I'm falling into my calling. And so I think about, again, when I was young, I think I told you all at the beginning, my mom's LPN, she was an RN, she, worked by day, went to school by night, and did everything she could to provide for us. And there was a period of time when we were on government assistance. And so we had to utilize WIC. We also had food stamps. And I'm not talking about the EBT card they use today. I'm talking about the book, the
Mm.
paper, where you have to
Right.
go in
Right.
the store, tear it out, and physically hand it. And you could see how people would look at you like, oh, you're using that? Oh, okay. And
Mm.
and I think about again government assistance, which in my opinion is another equity focused program that is designed to help lift people out of poverty. Um, and so I think about that, and then I also think about just kind of how I was a participant in Upward Bound, and I think about the fact that one of the things that my wife and I was able to do back in 2000, and I'll share this, back in 2000, and I was 18, no, 2000, yeah, 2018, we were drowning in debt. So we had $81,000 student loan debt, we had car debt, we had just ridiculous stuff. Um, and that was not including the home that we had as well, but 81,000 of consumer debt. And so we made a conscious decision to get out of debt. And what we did was we followed the Dave Ramsey program. And
Mhm.
so we got on the Dave Ramsey program, and he talks about going beans and rice, rice and beans, and so that's what we did. We cut our budget down to nothing. We lived on nothing, and I picked up a second job. I started working as a actually as a janitor, and so I actually cleaned office buildings. And so I would, take out the trash and sweep. So I would work here 8 to 5 at the university, and then I would go work for that cleaning company from about 5:30 to about 8:30, 9:30 at night, and I did that for about 6 months. And so eventually we were able to pay off all of our debt. Um, and then we decided to sell our house. After we paid off our debt, we decided to sell our house, and we moved into a 2 bedroom, 900 square foot apartment
Wow.
with our daughter.
Wow.
And we again cut our lifestyle down to nothing, and just really just began to save and really focus in on what we wanted to do. And so we lived in an apartment for 2 years, and we recently, back in January of this year, we bought a home, a smaller home, that we could afford. But other than that, we don't have any debt. And so for me, what that process taught me was, people always tell you, well, you should just, work hard and lift yourself up by your bootstraps. And when people, hear my story about, because I actually wrote a article about this in the newspaper as well. It's on my blog. When people look at me and they see what I've done, one of the things especially paying off debt, what they would say is, oh, if only more people would be like you, if
Mm,
only more people would just work hard. And what I got from that was basically the same thing I got when I graduated from my doctorate. You know, same thing I got when I graduated from my master's and my undergrad. If only more people like you would be like you. And what I started to see was that a lot of people had a single story in their mind about black men in this country,
Right.
and I had to make it very clear that that's not the story that I'm living,
Right.
because what they didn't see is they didn't see all of the black
mm,
folks that helped me when I was growing up, the black
mm.
community I grew up in that was really around me, put their hands around me. They didn't see again that we lived on government assistance for a period of time just to get by. They
Right.
also didn't see the fact that I was a product of the Upward Bound program. 4 years I was in that program,
Talk,
government
sir.
program, to
Talk, sir.
help build me, to help prepare me, to get me ready for college. They
Mhm.
also didn't see when I was in college for 4 years. Every summer, I worked with the Upward Bound program, working with those students, which provided me a check to be able to survive. So when they look at me and they say, "You pulled yourself up by your bootstraps," no, actually, there's a lot of, again, government assistance that was around me that people
Community.
can't see. The
Mhm.
community care. And so I really just try to get people to understand that it wasn't just about me. And I will say that there's a piece also on my site, and I really would love for people to read this, and it's called Black Women Leaders, that I wrote last year. It's on there. And
Oh, son.
I
Sir.
have
Talk, sir.
a I have a picture of 36 black women when you first click on it, that really have poured into my life and that have helped me over the years. And in
Wow.
the piece, I highlight some of those women, but at the very end, I actually take the time and I talk about the qualities that I learned from every single one of
Mm.
those 36 black women. And again, this was it was way more than that, but I focused in on these 36, and some of them was my Sunday school teacher, some of
Yes.
them were my godmama,
Yes.
of course, my mom, my
Yes.
wife, my sisters, my aunts, my cousins, people that really just poured into me. So, and I'll pause. I'll just say that it's not just about me; it's about my community that's got me here.
Wow.
That is amazing. I thank you so much. I actually need to log off now, but I just want to say it's been so amazing to hear from you. I am going to be going to your blog
Yes.
and checking out more of your articles. I just want to glean and read and hear kind of your perspective on so many things. And so keep it up. I wish I could stay. I probably should have logged off 15 minutes ago, but I couldn't. I just had to hear more. So thank you so much. And I'm excited to continue to hear more from you through your blog too.
Thank you. I appreciate you. I understand when you got to take care of kids. I'm the same way. I understand.
That's it. All right.
Carl, we'll talk to you a bit later. Thank you, sir, for coming on tonight.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. So, Ricky, I just got to tell you, thank you for that, because yes, community. And so I just want to take you back, because we were talking about the story that shaped you. And I love that basically what you said is that it's a community story. I love that, dude. You nailed it. You nailed it. Exactly. We there's a proverb that says that I am the wave, but I belong to the ocean, something of that sort. That I am the wave, but I'm a reflection of the ocean, and that sense. And so that's what that goes back to what I told for me, essentially Christian. The good news is that Jesus says there's a new kind of community here now.
Yes.
And that in this community, it doesn't matter how poor you are, it doesn't matter what color you are, it doesn't matter if you got one eye or no hand, if you've got leprosy, you belong. If you want to belong to this community, you can belong. And so it's being shaped and influenced by community and bringing that community story. So man, that is so powerful, that your why is because I'm the product of this beautiful community, and especially the wall of 37 Black women.
Yes.
Sir, they might be cutting you checks, sending it to your. Is your Cash App on your blog right now?
No.
My wife writing you a check right now. They sending you, they Cash Apping you right now. That was amazing. But I gotta say this, Dr. Booker and Kai. Linda and I we were in Kayla, our youngest daughter, in the Peace and Justice Initiative in Montgomery, Alabama, Equal Justice Initiative, in the museum and the outdoor memorial. And so you go into the museum, and I want to encourage St. Mark. I am going to plan a bus trip to take anybody who wants to go. We're going to get on a bus. We're going to travel to Birmingham and then go to Montgomery to see these museums. You got to know this. You've got to see this and consider it kind of like a freedom ride, because it's going to change your life. You go into this museum, and then it starts out with how Black people were taken from the African coast, from the West Coast, from the ship ports, placed on these ships. And you walk into this room, and on both sides, it's like they have these digital murals of the ocean. So it's like you literally feel like you're in an ocean, and it says that's where the journey began, and that many of them jumped into the water because they were so afraid of where they were going. But then once they got there, and so the story goes, and you walk through the museum, and it's telling all of these horrible stories, just how horrible things were, the conditions. But here's the bright spot, Dr. Booker. You get to about the third room down. You walk in, and it's like just bad news. Then all of a sudden you look up, and on a whole wall by herself is a beautiful picture of Harriet Tubman that you can find on the internet, by the way, reaching down, almost like she's reaching down from heaven, but she's reaching across a river, reaching over to grab people. And Linda and when Kayla stood there, it's like amazing. Like she was so amazing. She was
the mural.
Yes, the mural. Yes. And she was just so amazing. So that this Black woman, that she became a hero. And even regardless of the actual number of people, she became a symbol for this faith-based resilience to this horrible institution. She became the face of that, and became but every time, Dr. Booker, every time in Black folks' history, when we made a turn and said we're done with this and we're moving forward, it was a Black woman, Harriet Tubman. So Ida B. Wells was the one that said, okay, lynching has to stop. Ida B. Wells did that.
That's right.
Sir. So thank you, man. Kai, I'm sorry. I did a sneak preach where Rachel calls a sneak preach.
I love it.
But yes. And folks, you gotta go. You gotta go to the museum. But I'm telling you, in African American history, every time we made a major shift, it was led by the tenacity and fierceness of a Black woman who said, enough is enough. As a matter of fact, the full-blown civil rights movement, we know there were many sub-movements before Montgomery, Alabama. But we kind of, the linchpin is Montgomery, is Rosa Parks saying, and yes, we know it was strategically done, but still, her saying, I want to be the one who does that, like, we're done. Like, this is ending. This has to end now. So I think we've got to tell that story to our young Black girls and to our kids, all of our kids coming along, so that they will be empowered. Kai, I'm handing it back to you. I'm sorry, sir. That so blessed me that he did two things. His story is community, and that the essence of that community was this wall of Black women who are his heroes. It's just amazing.
Yes.
Of course.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes.
Wow. No, I know we're almost at the end of our time. I do have maybe two more questions for you, Rick. But one, highlighting, it really just resonated with me, the article you were talking about. You're talking about with Frank, and you were talking about, how he wasn't met with some of the tools and resources that we have now. You talked about this idea of redemption, and kind of I think the question I want to pose to everybody is, how do we, for each one of us, how do you reconcile the ideas of cancel culture and the Christian values of grace, restoration, and compassion?
Great question.
Yeah.
Wow.
You want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. Yes. When I think about that, I really just kind of lean into I don't know, I think about Paul when he had the thorn in his side, and he was, begging God, to, please remove this from me. And of course, we don't know a whole lot about specifically, the context around that. But God's response to Paul, in 2 Corinthians 12:9 was, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in your weakness. And I think about that. And so when I think about grace, grace is help that's given to us by God because God desires us to have it. And it's not necessarily because of anything that we have done to earn it. And I think that's so important. And again, that's how I try to really live my life. And one of the things that I also want to say is I am a big believer that all of us I know that we all have these promises that we espouse, these values that we espouse, but are we actually living them out? And I know no one's perfect, but I feel like that we as a people have to be more intentional. About, okay, here's what I say I believe. I believe this. I believe in the good news. I believe in what Jesus says we should do with the two great commandments. But how am I actually living that out? And so for me, what I have came to do is I love how I know you all are probably very familiar
Yes,
with
Dottie. Yes. Yes.
I'm sure y'all are probably familiar with Dr. Esau McCaulley.
Yeah.
He wrote the book Reading While Black. And one of the things that I love that he talks about is he talks a lot about, and not necessarily in the book, but I was watching a podcast he did on Jude 3 Project. I don't know if y'all seen that on YouTube.
Yes.
And so I've seen him talk, and he's talked about staying out of judgment. And so one of the things he talked about is, when you're struggling with the scripture, which there's many that I struggle with, he said you should ask yourself a couple questions. Have I opened up a biblical commentary and read what 2 or 3 scholars have said about that scripture? Number one. Have I looked through the history of the church to find out how they dealt with that issue? And he also says, have I read whole books devoted to that specific topic, which is the reason why I read Reading While Black.
Exactly.
So have I read that? And then he said that sometimes what it means to be a Christian is to actually live in what did he say, kind of the tension of not understanding the text, and to give God and yourself time to kind of wrestle with these
Come
ideas
on, sir.
and kind of make sense of them. And so, and this is the point I really love, that toward the end he talked about, he said that you may get to a point of saying, I may never understand this passage, but that doesn't mean that God hasn't shown me enough information to trust him. And I know my
Wow.
godmama,
Wow.
Mama
Wait,
Jim.
whoa, 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 whoa. Man,
Mm,
you just okay, keep going. You just knocked it out the park. That even when I may not fully understand the scripture, that I can trust
yeah,
God.
has God shown me enough throughout my entire life to still trust him? And so my mama, my godmother, we call her Mama Jim. She's on the picture with the wall of black women. I never forget, she, she was telling my mom one time, and I'm not gonna tell the whole story, but I know my mom one time, she said that I have prayed about for God to do something for me. It was something she was going to, I had prayed about it. But even if he doesn't do it, I still know that he's able. And for me, that I remember that to this day, and I always think about that. Like, there's a lot of things I want, God to do for me, but even if he doesn't do it, I'm able. And so, you know, but also going back to Reverend Esau McCullough, he says that there are times when we'll get to a place where we might say, for right now, specifically when we're struggling with that text, for right now, or maybe even for the rest of my life, I have to suspend judgment on this, and then God in his own providence will allow us to function as Christians this way. And for me personally, there are many scriptures that's where I'm at right now. I'm wrestling, and I'm still wrestling with it, but I'm like, I'm completely staying out of judgment. And I'm gonna trust God and allow me to function as a Christian this way. And I'm still going to have authentic and genuine relationships with people, even though they may have an identity that I don't identify with.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Salute. There's an officer in the room, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh man.
Man, yes.
Yeah.
So and I gotta jump. So
I'm so upset that I don't have a voice.
I know, right? I know. I really believe. I know you are. I know. But I get because what you've done is you've taken the work of DE&I out of from the corporate setting, and you've talked about it the last 30 minutes in personal relationships.
Mm,
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
That is,
mm,
which means it's a part of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you and Kai, I just encourage you all, because whatever we decide to do, we don't know if the world's going to embrace our gift.
Right.
We don't know if the world's going to embrace our passion. But whether they embrace it or not, if it's what makes us come alive, then we got to do it with all of our might for as long as we can. And so you all just stay in the work. It's worth it. But as you say, it's not just something I believe I espouse. It's not just something that I talk about in a professional setting. But do I really live it? And is it manifested in my personal life, from my relationship with my family members to how I treat the stranger on the street? That this concept of what we're trying to do with D&I, is it at work, and is it, and understand that's a kingdom concept and living it out. Thank you so much. Kai's going to close us out. I don't know if Yolanda wants to try to say anything, but sir, thank you. Please come back. I want to come. I have 2 reasons to come to Fayetteville now. I want to come to Fayetteville just to hang out.
Look, come on up. You're definitely welcome to come up anytime. I would love to have you here. And I do want to say, I have to give credit to Barbara Jordan, because that we use practicing matching your promises. We got that from Barbara Jordan, who I'm sure many of you probably know.
Yes.
If you don't know who Barbara
Yes.
Jordan is, just Google her.
Just go.
And she talked about, into the practices, into the promises of America, match the practices. We got a lot of work to do. And so that's where I got that from Barbara Jordan. And I'm very thankful for my colleagues who work with me and help me during this process.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, Well, listen, I know we're at 8:30. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So, number one, Pastor Yo, thank you so much for helping navigate us in the back. Pastor Robert, thanks for being you. People know how to tune in and what you're going to be showing tonight. So we're glad that you were able to get that out. Pastor Kyle had to go ahead and leave us. Listen, to my friend, my brother, I will close us out on this thought. There's so many challenges in the Black community. There are so many identities and persons that make up the diaspora of who we are and voices that don't get heard. I want to thank you so much tonight for being a great representative for young Black men, for being such a role model and an example, brother. I am such a crybaby, man. I am so excited for you, Rick. I'm so proud of you. Man, it's just so good to see brothers doing well, man. So to your wife, your lovely mother, your church family back home, hey, tell them all that we love them. We thank you so much. We love you and support you. St. Mark, thanks for letting us be here tonight. We hope that you join us next week. We'll have another Eric Farlow.
Eric.
Okay, it's gonna get out of hand.
Put the UAM with us too, Eric.
Yeah.
Eric, come on with us sometime, man. Come on and let me interview you, bro. We love to do it.
I'm gonna finish my sentence. So join us next week for another wonderful interview. Please go check out Rick's blog. We've linked it. We've put it up a few times, so go check it out. All right, y'all. Thank y'all so much. We'll catch you next week.
Hey, what I do want to say one more thing. Hey, I want to encourage everybody over the holiday season, build a wall of Black women. Build your own wall of Black women who have influenced your life.
Amen.
Build a wall.
And before you log off, please, Toys for Joy.
Yes. So let me make a quick spiel for that. So St. Mark is reaching out. We're trying to reach the children in our community. And so we've started a community choir, and we invite children to be a part of that choir, be a part of the worship arts ministry, the dance team, the flag team. You don't have to be a member of St. Mark to participate. We're just trying to provide be a haven of hope and a haven of our purpose for kids in this community. And so for Christmas on the 19th of December, we're going to give a toy to every child who shows up. So we don't know how many are going to show up. I was told that Pastor, be careful about that, because 400 kids, St. Mark is status in the city. 400 kids may come. Hey, so you see, Yolanda says, if you show up, she's gonna make sure your kid gets a toy. We're gonna to give every kid a toy, but we want the St. Mark members to come prepared on the next couple of Sundays. We have lots of toys, but bring more. If you don't want to purchase a toy, you can just cash out to the church, use the church's Cash App handle, and designate it as Toys for Joy, the Toys for Joy Mission Project, and it'll go towards that purpose. So we're looking forward to an amazing day. And again, Rick, I just want to say thank you so much. You've been such a blessing, and we look forward to having you back for another conversation. We love to come back for you to talk more into your journey with that was an amazing story you told about getting out of debt, you and your wife working together. That was an amazing, Yolanda and I, as pastors, we know about 30 people we wish were listening tonight that would have been blessed by hearing that story, because everybody knows where they need to go, but am I willing to sacrifice to get there? And to hear that from you, and now to see where you are, is just an amazing model. So God bless you. I agree with your mom. Mom, I agree with you. He is walking into that calling, but we're gonna just wait and pray it through and see it manifest. Mom, just make sure that I don't miss. Well, Kyle, make sure that I get the notice, and I'm going to be right there on the. I'm going to be right there. I'm not going to sit in the pulpit. I'm going to sit on the front row. I'm sitting on the front row so I can sing along. God bless you all. Have an amazing night.